From the world of politics to the world of business, this is Balance of Power. Live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Joe Matthew, I'm Kaylee Lyons.
Donald Trump says he wants to end daylight saving time as he prepares to attend tomorrow's Army-Navy football game with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and House Speaker Mike Johnson in tow.
The leaders convening with the congressional game plan for 2025 also on the agenda. We'll have more with Erin Covey, who covers the House for the Cook Political Report.
And with Secretary of State Antony Blinken now in the Middle East again, we discuss the impact the political upheaval in Syria, the ongoing war in Gaza, is having on food security. Carl Skau of the World Food Program joins us this hour. Thanks for being here on the Friday edition of Balance of Power. We made it to the end of the week, Kaylee, and we begin this evening with an issue that Donald Trump is bringing to light. See what I did there? Daylight savings time. The president-elect posting today on Truth Social saying the Republican Party will use its best efforts to eliminate daylight saving time, which has a small but strong constituency, but shouldn't, he says. Daylight saving time is inconvenient and very costly to our nation. I don't know if you feel that way, Kaylee, if you like it early light or late light, but no one seems to agree on that particular part of it.
Yeah, I think I might be biased toward preserving daylight saving time.
Okay.
Because I'm an early bird, not a night owl.
Fair enough.
I like it when the sun comes up earlier, and it's okay with me when we walk out of here after the show ends at 6 p.m.
Sure.
and it's dark outside.
I think
then I can just go to bed.
Most people agree on is they just don't like changing the clocks.
Sure.
Like this from time to time. And joining us for a closer look is Bloomberg's Stephanie Lai. Couldn't imagine you'd be talking about this today at the table, Stephanie, could you? Is this going to be one of the first big changes that Donald Trump makes when he comes into the White House? We're changing the clocks?
Perhaps. I mean, we could see this on day one, along with the immigration executive orders. I think one of the most striking things about this is that Donald Trump is known to, sporadically put out his ideas on Fridays, right? Mm-hmm. Very recently, we had also seen him truth out about preserving the U.S. dollar as the world currency. That also came out of the left field, and it's really a reflection of who's got his ear at that present moment.
Mm-hmm. Or earlier this week when he posted on Truth Social, if you invest $1 billion in the U.S., you get expedited permits. With no more specific information than that, we still have a lot of questions. What we know for sure is that Donald Trump will be in the Washington, D.C. area tomorrow with quite the entourage at the Army-Navy football game, including both, we understand, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who has been floated as a potential replacement defense secretary nominee if Pete Hegseth cannot get confirmed, and Pete Hegseth will also be there.
Yeah, I mean, that might be a tricky situation. But as we're seeing play out, Donald Trump and Governor Ron DeSantis have been slowly rebuilding and rekindling their relationship. And so to have them in the same space is just another sign that they're working towards that direction. Now, of course, Trump has also said that he's standing behind Hegseth in his nomination. So, this is going to be a fun weekend to watch. I'm sure everyone in the crowd's going to be watching them and their interactions as well as the game.
Yeah, I suspect the cameras will be pretty well focused on the presidential box as well. So we've got Elon Musk is going to be there. Do we know that?
I don't know.
Is he getting on the jet? We'll find that. Ron DeSantis, yes, we know. Pete Hegseth. Mike Johnson. How much work can you actually get done here? Why do they have to go to a football game to craft the congressional agenda for the next session of Congress?
I think that's one of the things that Trump has loved to do in the past. When he goes to these sporting events or these big events, he brings his whole entourage.
That's for sure.
I think Mike Johnson also went to the UFC game with him very recently. So, you can do a little bit of talking in between the walkout moment and on the plane. But also, Vice President-elect J.D. Vance will also be there.
Yeah, with Daniel Penny.
That's right.
Who was just acquitted on charges relating to that choking death on the subway. We do know he likes to roll with an entourage. We saw that, as you pointed out earlier, Joe, at the New York Stock Exchange just yesterday when it felt like every cabinet-level nominee was there with him. Just finally on the presence of DeSantis, how much of this is also about Trump trying to get DeSantis' ear whenever he can to advocate for his daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, getting the seat that could be vacated and likely will by Marco Rubio?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely something that's on his mind. A lot of the insiders in his world are saying that they've been really pushing for this. And, while DeSantis doesn't necessarily have the same sort of leverage that he might have in this discussion, getting closer, having Trump and DeSantis together, building that relationship certainly helps. And it helps Trump build his family legacy.
Indeed. All right, Bloomberg's Stephanie Lai, thank you so much. Now, exactly 1 week from today, is the deadline for government funding. And lawmakers are inching closer to a stopgap funding measure that they'll have to pass before leaving town for the holidays and actually leaving town for the entire 118th Congress. Joining us now for more is Bloomberg's Scully, who leads Bloomberg's Capital Influence team. So, Megan, we know it's going to be a continuing resolution. It's taken a long time to get the language. I think we can expect it this weekend. What's going to be in it?
So we're expecting it Sunday-ish. You know, they will all be at the football game, so maybe we might push it into Monday. So we'll see. But they do tend to like to drop these things late Sunday nights to ruin all of our weekends. We're expecting it to be a pretty straight CR, basically extending government funding into the springtime, around March sometime. And it will include some disaster aid. How much is still being negotiated? The White House has requested upwards of $100 billion for, Hurricane Milton relief and other disasters over the last several months. Some Republicans have said, maybe we'll give you half of that and then we can use the next funding bill to fund the rest of it. But those are the negotiations that are certainly taking place. We
spoke earlier today, the early edition of Balance of Power, with Terry Haynes, the founder of Pangea Policy, who's seen a couple of funding deadlines go by. Here's what he said about the likelihood of this actually getting done in time for the deadline. Listen.
They're pushing around on disaster funding, likely a couple of other things. But, the bottom line is it's in no one's political interest to have a shutdown over Christmas. And so they're very, very likely not to do it.
That seems to be what everyone agrees on here. We don't have a shutdown now, but we could be having a different conversation when this continuing resolution expires. And you start looking ahead to March. The menu of options start to become more challenging.
Sure. Well, especially when you're talking about the Defense Department, which really hates continuing resolutions because they can't sign new contracts for massive weapons programs. The heat will be on at that point to get at least some of the government under control in terms of funding and not just extend, the current fiscal year. But it's going to be wrapped up in the debate over an immigration executive order that Stephanie mentioned earlier, over, what we call the reconciliation package, the tax extension, where debate's going to be getting going in earnest then, and the debt ceiling, which will rear its ugly head once again next year. So the pressure will be on, and the majority, especially in the House, the Republican majority, will be tiny. And any one provision could swing the bill one way or the other. So it's going to be difficult. They want to come back to a fresh slate, but they're going to be fighting a lot of the same battles again.
Finally, Megan, I want to ask you about one very high-profile member of the House. The Speaker Emerita, Nancy Pelosi, we learned today, had an incident, a fall, during a congressional trip to Europe. And according to the New York Times, fractured her hip. Now, her team has said she's still working from the hospital, but still, this does put a spotlight on the fact that she is 84 years old. Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader in the Senate at 82, also had a fall this week. How much does this, even though Joe Biden is leaving the White House, put the focus back on the age of some of these highest profile members of government?
Certainly does. I mean, it wasn't a good week to be an octogenarian in Congress, for sure. We're hearing that Pelosi is expected to, undergo a procedure and have, hopefully a full recovery. Mitch McConnell was back to work after his fall. Of course, he has, kind of a long history of health issues. But they are handing the keys over to the next generation. McConnell will no longer be in leadership when the new Congress starts. He'll be replaced by John Thune, who's in his 60s, which is a spring chicken in the Senate. Nancy Pelosi, of course, is no longer Speaker or minority leader in the House. She handed the keys over to Hakeem Jeffries 2 years ago. So we are seeing, while they're still in power, they're phasing out.
Well, we'll have some news to look for over the weekend with the help of Bloomberg's Scully. Thank you, Megan. Coming up, look at House Republicans raise their thin majority we've been talking about here and how that might impact the agenda in the next Congress. Erin Covey will join, editor at the Cook Political Report. She's next on Balance of Power, Bloomberg TV and radio.
Y'all have heard me talking about our proverbial playbook we've been developing for about a year. It's well designed, and so we have a menu of options. What we're deciding right now is the sequence of how we run those plays.
If the Republicans go down the road of the GOP tax scam 2.0, I'm confident there will be no Democratic support.
Members of House leadership on both the Republican and Democratic side this week previewing what's to come as Republicans prepare for the 119th Congress with just a few spare votes in their slim majority. Joining us now for more here on Bloomberg TV and radio is Erin Covey. She's editor at the Cook Political Report and spends a lot of time focusing on the House. So, Erin, when we consider the fact that it already would be a thin majority in the 119th for Republicans, then you take out 3 members, Matt Gaetz, who has resigned, 2 others who will be joining, presumably, the second Trump administration. You could afford to lose maybe 1 vote early in the year until these specials happen. How hard is that going to be for Mike Johnson?
It's going to be really difficult. And in fact, he can't even afford to lose a single vote if all 3 of those seats are vacant at the same time, because that would then give Republicans a 217 to 250 majority in the House. And if one Republican defects and votes with Democrats, that would result in a tie. And so in reality, the Speaker can afford no defections, and that's going to make it really difficult for the next couple of months. Now, there are going to be Florida special elections to fill 2 potentially vacant seats. One is already vacant. That's Matt Gaetz' seat, and then Mike Walz's seat is expected to be vacant as he'll be joining the Trump administration. Those seats will be filled later after special elections in April. And then a New York seat held by Elise Stefanik, who was also appointed to the Trump administration. That seat will be filled at some point later in the spring. We don't actually know the date yet because Stefanik has yet to resign and probably won't resign until she's actually confirmed by the Senate for her position. But it's going to be very difficult for Johnson to navigate with such a historically thin majority.
Well, in the meantime, as you well know, Erin, there's a conversation and a question over sequencing right now and exactly what this Congress should be prioritizing when it begins next year. It's apparently going to be decided at a football game tomorrow. I'm not sure your thoughts on that. And I don't think there are any Democrats invited to Donald Trump's skybox at the Army-Navy game. So how is this going to come together with regard to the border and extending the Trump tax cuts? Could this be an all at once, as some are suggesting?
Right. So that's the question, whether or not Republicans try to pass this in one massive reconciliation bill. Then that would include renewing the Trump tax cuts that were, of course, signed into law in 2017, along with legislation for border security and energy policy as well. And Republicans in the House and Senate are a bit divided over how they want to do this. One faction would like to do everything in one bill. Another faction would like to separate it and focus on the border first and then get to the tax cuts later. But passing those tax cuts is going to be quite difficult. And so the Republicans who in the House who are having to navigate that are pushing to start that sooner.
Well, and when we consider the very different elements that a tax package could include, I wonder if the most problematic one of them for the majority is going to be the SALT cap. Donald Trump advisors, we reported yesterday, are considering doubling that to $20,000. At least one New York Republican, Nick LaLota, said that he does not see that as satisfactory. And I just wonder, Erin, how many members of the Republican majority in high tax states like New York and California could actually have their jobs and therefore the majority at risk, depending on what happens with SALT specifically?
Yeah, I mean, that's a crucial issue for these Republicans in these high tax states, particularly folks like Nick LaLota and Mike Lawler, who are in seats that could be competitive in 2026. Now, Lawler, of course, might run for governor in New York, in which case he would still have incentives to make sure that his agenda is passed on that. But it does look like that is going to be probably one of the most contentious battles in terms of the upcoming tax fight.
You know, I'm supposed to ask you about a government shutdown, I think, Erin, because it's a week from today that we have a funding deadline and there's no deal yet. Yet no one's running countdown clocks. Everybody seems to think that they'll find a way. It's just a question of whether we kick the can to February or March. And there's also a question about what we should do with disaster funding. Your thoughts on this, because this is holding things up a bit. The White House asked for almost $100 billion to help recover from the hurricanes that blew through largely red states. But we had Congressman Tim Burchett on the air just the other day who referred to FEMA as a garbage can that he said should be tipped upside down. The essence of this debate over disaster funding comes down to what?
Right. I think ultimately there is no political will on either side of the aisle to not pass this disaster relief legislation and ultimately keep the government open, because they know it will affect their constituents, even if in theory, going after government agencies like FEMA can be politically convenient in this moment. I think that there's little question that the government will be funded, and now that's going to get kicked down to the new year, of course. But there is not going to be a government shutdown, most likely.
Well, looks like we'll beat the clock again as we continue to look forward to the 119th Congress. Erin, there also, of course, is another strata of leadership, if you will, and that would be the committee chairs, which we learned a lot about this week as the steering committee selected them. And the Speaker, Mike Johnson, shared his thoughts about the caliber of those candidates who were running for the gavels earlier this week. Let's listen.
These are thoughtful elections. We have an embarrassment of riches, frankly. When you have multiple people running for these gavels, we discussed it yesterday in steering, any of these folks are doing an extraordinary job because they're all great colleagues and have great experience to the table and all that. So stay tuned on the final composition of conference chairs. We'll see how it all shakes out.
One of those competitive races, Erin, is one we care a lot about here on Bloomberg TV and radio. That's the Financial Services Committee, which had 4 contenders, and French Hill of Arkansas ultimately got the gavel. When we look at all of those incoming chairmen, and they all are men, other than the fact that there's no female representation, do you see other common denominators here? What does this tell you about the trajectory of the House?
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, I don't think there were any massive surprises in some of these fights, though I think what's one thread that ran through all of them was the fact that the Speaker didn't necessarily make his preferences clear in a lot of these battles, as previous majority leaders have done. And so that led to some more unexpected outcomes in terms of some committee fights. But overall, no huge surprises. There are a couple of high-profile committee chairs who are leaving Congress, one in particular, Kathy McMorris Rogers, who currently chairs Energy and Commerce Committee. And of course, that has led to the fact that there are no Republican women who are chairing House committees in the new year. And so that is a dynamic that I think a lot of Republicans are talking about behind the scenes. But, you know, of course, from Johnson, you're not hearing about that as much as you might.
Well, I'm glad you brought it up. It's the first time in almost a decade we have an all-boys club here at the top of each committee. What kind of a statement does that make for the conference?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because overall, actually, the number of Republican women in the House is shrinking. And that's after the number of Republican women has gone up in the House for the past couple of cycles, particularly after 2020, when there was a lot more emphasis on electing women in these competitive races and in open seats as well. And so we've kind of seen that trajectory turn around. Now, in the long run, we'll see if that continues to be the case. But I'll just point out in Republicans' House freshman class, there were only 2 women out of their class of 31 freshmen. So that goes to show how small that size is.
Helping us look ahead to 119th Congress, Erin Covey. It's great to have you back, Erin, editor of the Cook Political Report. Thank you. Coming up, President Emmanuel Macron has appointed a new prime minister of France following last week's no confidence vote. We'll have that story for you next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. French President Emmanuel Macron today appointed a new prime minister, Francois Bayrou. The long-time centrist was tapped after last week's no-confidence vote and predecessor Michel Barnier. Bayrou faces a difficult task in not meeting the same fate and will try to garner support from both the center-left and center-right to avoid a majority forming against him. He also will need to act quickly to rewrite fiscal plans with concessions to buy support from some of Macron's adversaries. Today on the early edition, we spoke with Catherine Kleppinger, professor of French studies at George Washington University, about this new prime minister.
is a really, I would say, both interesting and also somewhat predictable choice. If you had asked me, who was my top guess, I would have said Francois Bayrou. He is, in a lot of ways, a political animal. He's been incredibly present on the French political scene for decades. He's actually known Barnier for 40 years, and he referenced that in his acceptance introductory speech today. A lot of French people probably remember him primarily for his 2007 presidential run, to which he lost to Nicolas Sarkozy, but he was a very important third-party candidate at that point. He's been the leader of one of the main centrist, slightly right-leaning, but still centrist parties for decades. He was also an early advocate of Emmanuel Macron's presidential ambitions, joining Macron's team as early as February of 2017. It also bears noting that he was one of Macron's initial ministers in 2017 as a minister of justice. He was obligated to step down a month later, however, because he has some legal troubles, and I can come back to that in a minute. But he has been in the inner circle ever since the beginning, and he is a close confidant to Macron. At the same time, he's also interesting because he's managed to toe a middle ground. He is not disliked, and I use the double negative intentionally in that he is able to work across the aisle. I'm not going to say that everyone loves him, but people don't immediately come out of the gate being ready to vote no confidence in him again.
You can find our full conversation with Catherine Kleppinger. We learned a lot. The professor of French studies at George Washington University, online or on the terminal. And Kaylee Lyons, it reminds us of the potential blowback that a politician can receive by forcing austerity down the throats of politicians, maybe echoes of that here in Washington.
Well, as we're facing down the barrel, essentially, of spending cuts of our own, potentially, certainly that's what the Department of Government Efficiency under Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy want to achieve, is a more balanced budget, if you will. But this is, of course, coming at a time where Donald Trump would also like to pursue pretty deep tax cuts.
Exactly.
And all of that does add up to a picture that if you would consult, for example, the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, might not be the most fiscally responsible.
That's true. They're actually out with new research today, questioning this once again, not even so much about deficits, but growth, because that was the implication here, is that, well, we may end up running up deficit spending, we'll have a growing economy, and at least as a standalone item, it apparently, according to that group, is not going to bring. But we start adding a lot of different elements, including cutting red tape. The Trump team would tell you that we don't have the story right there.
Yeah, well, the red tape thing is certainly something Trump pulled attention to this week, as he's promising expedited permits for investment in the U.S.
Absolutely. How much more on the Doge? You know how they pronounce the Doge in France? Doge. Coming up, President Biden pledging support and supplies to Syria as it rebuilds after the fall of Bashar al-Assad. Carl Skau from the World Food Program is up with us next, here on Balance of Power, Bloomberg TV and radio.
We will engage with all Syrian groups, including within the process led by the United Nations, to establish a transition away from the Assad regime toward independent, sovereign, independent, I want to say it again, sovereign Syria, with a new constitution, a new government that serves all Syrians. The United States will do whatever we can to support them, including through humanitarian relief, to help restore Syria after more than a decade of war.
President Biden speaking from the White House on Sunday, pledging U.S. support to Syria through the country's political transition. With more on what that support that Syrians need right now is Carl Skau, Deputy Executive Director, Chief Operating Officer at the World Food Program. He just returned from a visit to the country. And we thank you, Carl, for being with us here on Bloomberg TV and radio. Food security was already an issue in Syria before the fall of the Assad regime. 3 million people in need. What did you see when you were visiting cities like Aleppo and Damascus?
Well, basically, we have a triple crisis in Syria. It was already a socioeconomic disaster before the war in Lebanon. Then came the war in Lebanon with hundreds of thousands of people entering Syria. And now we have this latest change of events with displacements. And so basically, we're dealing with a triple crisis. And as you pointed to, over 3 million people acutely food insecure. The World Food Programme is present. We have been present over the past 14 years. We have offices, 7 offices throughout the country, and we're now doing everything we can to step up. What I witnessed is really the level of desperation of people. I met women in Aleppo and in Homs who basically said that, it was better during the war. The bombs were raining on us, but the world cared, and we had food for our children. So the level of desperation is really, at new levels, and we really need now to step in, and we hope there will be funding coming so that we can scale up our programs and really take this window of opportunity to promote a change in Syria.
Well, certainly change has come, at least in terms of the government. It's still not clear what the new Syrian regime or what power will look like. There is, of course, this transitional government that is taking shape with HTS, the rebel group that ousted Assad. Has the World Food Programme been in communication with anyone in HTS? Can they be a trusted ally in this effort to get people fed?
I mean, we are humanitarians, so we speak with all groups necessary to be able to serve people in need. And so we have indeed, related to these groups also in the past. And we're now working already in Aleppo. We're working in Homs. We're working in Hama. And it's been, quite orderly in those regions, being able to respond to the newly displaced. In Damascus, it has been, a bit more tricky. We had challenges early on with looting our warehouse there. But now, we have received the guarantees that security will be provided, our work will be facilitated. So we are looking at to restock and to be able to scale up.
Carl, you mentioned funding, and I know you've talked about the scarcity of funding forcing you to make cuts in some of the services that you provide. Are you engaging with the private sector to diversify your sources of cash?
Over the past 4 years, there has been a tripling in needs when it comes to acutely food insecure. We're now at 340 million people acutely food insecure throughout the world. That's a record number. I mean, if that was a country, it would be a very large country. The funding has remained more or less the same. So we are struggling with that challenge of attending to 3 times more hungry with the same funding. And so we are indeed looking at how to diversify. And the private sector is an important potential there. And we are now investing in looking at what more we can do to partner with the private sector, not only for donations of funds, but also finding creative solutions, drawing on the private sector to be even more efficient and effective with the resources available. In Syria particularly, we haven't really had the chance to do so. I mean, there's been a quick change of events here. And so, we're now about to begin mobilizing resources, and we hopefully we would be able also to tap into private resources for these ends.
I'd like to ask you as well, Carl, about another area in which we've been seeing an acute hunger crisis, and that, of course, is Gaza, with the war between Israel and Hamas ongoing. We know that the World Food Programme has had some degree of difficulty on getting resources and food into Gaza and also with distributing it. Can you just give us a status update on how those aid efforts are going?
Frankly, it's hard to find new words to describe the situation in Gaza. But, in the southern parts of the country, we are now again reversing back to a disastrous situation. And this is largely due to the complete breakdown of law and order. I mean, the security situation in southern Gaza is just beyond anything at the moment. We are being looted as we move along the roads. We are being looted in our warehouses, but also on distribution. Urgently, there needs to be security provided for us in order to be able to continue our operations. We are delivering about a third of the food if we compare to what we did in July, August. And also commercial sector input have really decreased and tightened over the past couple of months. So, there is really now a crunch, and people are hungry as they face the winter. And they face this winter in very temporary and rudimentary shelter on the beach of Gaza when the rains and the cold is coming. So, we are really faced with a disaster. And again, it's hard to find new words, really. But there needs to be a change here. We need to see a change in Gaza in order to be able to cater to these people.
Well, considering the words that we heard from your director, Cindy McCain, back in May, Carl, she described the situation in northern Gaza as a, quote, full-blown famine. How would you describe it now?
Well, you know, because of those calls back in May, there was a change. So we were able to bring much more food in June, July, August. We were able to somewhat stabilize the situation. There was also more commercial food coming in, so markets began to pick up and people could, you know, even eat some vegetables and fruits at reasonable price. That really helped stabilize the situation. But as I said, in October, November, that has again dropped to about a third of what we were able to do during the summer. And this is happening as the commercial sector is also struggling to get more goods in, and as we are facing a very harsh winter for the people living out basically in the open. I mean, last winter, people were mainly staying inside houses. I mean, many families in a room maybe. But this winter, you know, about 1 million people are basically out in the open with just simple plastic covering their heads. And so, you know, it is a very, very difficult situation facing the people in Gaza.
Well, and Carl, especially as we have this conversation during the holiday season in which many people are looking to give where they can, what is the best way for people to help those in need?
Well, of course, we would be very happy if people could contribute to the World Food Programme. That can be done, you know, through our website. There is also an app, Share the Meal, that we mobilize resources through, and you can be sure that we take care of this money well. We are as efficient and effective as possible, and we are also making sure that resources reach the intended people that we want to help. So, you know, any contribution will be cared for and will be delivered in the most efficient and effective way possible. And WFP is really the ones at the very front line, whether it is in Sudan or in Gaza or now in Syria. You can count on WFP to really target those most in need on the front lines and in an efficient way.
All right, Carl Skau, Deputy Executive Director and Chief Operating Officer at the World Program. Thank you for joining us. Coming up, our signature political panel will join as we close out this week in Washington. So stay with us on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
Does anybody want to keep daylight savings time? Have we found that guy yet? Well, I don't know.
Geez, I think so. Yeah. Don't you want to like see on the kids see so they can get on the school bus in the morning?
We can handle all that. We can handle all that. The going back and forth is just, it's antiquated. It was created for farmers. It's just completely antiquated.
Republican Governor of New Hampshire, Chris Sununu, with an opinion yesterday on the early edition of Balance of Power, sharing his grievances surrounding daylight saving time. And now the president-elect has weighed in, posting on True Social today and calling the practice, quote, inconvenient and very costly, end quote. He says Republicans will make an effort to eliminate it. Joining us now here on Bloomberg TV and radio for more, Rick Davis, Stone Court Capital Partner, and Jeannie Shanzano, Political Science Professor at Iona University and Senior Democracy Fellow at the Center for the Study. Okay. Rick's already laughing. Rick, you can't do that to me.
What did I do? This is the end of a long week.
Is it going to get eliminated?
Yeah, I hope so. I hate it. I'm with Chris Sununu and Donald Trump. I think it's become a Republican platform.
Yeah.
Well,
clearly, yeah.
Now, we still have farmers, but, you know, they don't need that daylight to work in.
I think the issue is the changing of the clocks, right? Whether you can go with an early morning when it's light out or a later evening when it's light out, Jeannie, is the inconvenience, he says, that I guess we're annoyed to do this twice a year. Have you had it?
I've had it. You guys are having too much fun down there. I'm completely jealous. And yes, the only thing is, you know, when I was younger, it took me a while to remember spring ahead, fall back. That's all going to go by the wayside with these young folks. They'll have nothing that they have to remember about any of this. But besides that, I agree. It's time to get it done. But, you know, you got to tell the people who have restaurants and other kinds of businesses in vacation land,
that's right.
They oppose it.
You know, more of us have heart attacks the morning you spring forward. Have you heard about that, Rick? That's the costly part of this, I guess, Donald Trump is talking about?
What, having a heart attack is costly? Yes, I would say that's very costly to a lot of people.
The impact on the healthcare sector is real.
Oh, burying people's expensive. I mean, is that what you're getting
There's that as well, yes.
All right, I'm going to take a turn here away from this daylight savings conversation so I can get it together. This weekend, Donald Trump, when he's not advocating for eliminating daylight savings, will be at the Army-Navy football game. It's happening tomorrow.
Go Navy.
He's bringing an entourage. I agree, go Navy. Full all the way. However, this entourage includes, I guess, a Navy veteran, technically, in Ron DeSantis.
That's right.
The governor of Florida, and Pete Hegseth, the current defense secretary designate, who, if he doesn't get through, there's been rumors DeSantis will replace. What's this about, having them both in the same suite with the president-elect?
Well, you got security on both sides. If one doesn't work out, you're immediately going to be able to pivot to another option. And by the way, exactly what he did when his pick for Attorney General didn't work out. It was within 24 hours. He had another one queued up and ready to go. So this is a president who clearly has fallback positions on some of the more controversial folks. But this is one, too, where I think Donald Trump, thought that Pete Hegseth wasn't going to make it through last week. And you saw that sort of PR operation start to get up about, DeSantis would be a good pick. All of a sudden he was going to go to the game with him. And kudos to Pete Hegseth. He survived another week in Washington.
Incredible.
Nobody would have given him a chance to do that. So it kind of put Trump in an awkward spot because here's a guy who he wants to have put in that job who survived better than he thought he would.
Could be a very awkward skybox. It'll be like the latest episode of The Apprentice, Jeannie, with Ron DeSantis and Pete Hegseth facing off. I just wonder, does this have to do with Ron DeSantis any longer as a potential defense secretary, to Rick's point, or is this really about making Lara Trump the next senator from Florida?
I think that Lara Trump is number one in terms of what the president would like to achieve. And should Hegseth go down, which seems less likely today than it did a week ago, then Ron DeSantis may be in waiting. But this is very typical Donald Trump. He always does these auditions, brings people in, has them talk. But I think for Ron DeSantis, he will have to make sure that if he doesn't have the defense in, waiting, that he's got another ask, because Donald Trump is surely going to ask that Lara Trump be nominated or be named to fill that Senate seat. She's been very, very clear she is ready for that.
Well, yes, she has. In fact, earlier this week on Fox, Lara Trump had this to say about the prospects of being a senator from Florida. Let's listen.
We've all had the opportunity over the past 9 years, really, to fully involve ourselves in politics, to understand the American people, what they want. And we've all been residents of the state of Florida now for over 3 years. And if that's something that's put in front of me, it would be a true honor.
3 years, Rick. Are we looking at the next senator from Florida?
A veteran. Yeah, I think you are looking at the next senator from Florida. And it really doesn't matter who the governor is. There's a succession in Florida for governor, and if DeSantis goes, his attorney general is going to be the governor, and she's perfectly capable of making this appointment. So I don't think it really has anything to do with the Senate appointment. And look, the nice thing if you're Ron DeSantis is there's a history of Trump cabinet officers going in and out on a pretty regular basis in the first term. And so there's likely to be a job opening that he can be considered for within the first year of the Trump administration. So I think that we just watched the next senator from Florida do a little star turn there, but it'll also be really something to have someone in the Senate named Trump. It's going to be a real challenge for those people who are
Start
in
of
leadership.
a dynasty?
Well, start. How many members of their family have served in government since he first got elected in 2017. So, there's a dynasty getting to work. And the question is, do the math on, when does Barron Trump be eligible for running for president?
Well, speaking of dynasties, the New York Times says you can add Tim Cook to the list of high-tech executives warming up to Donald Trump. Jeannie, they're going to be having dinner at Mar-a-Lago, a meeting Friday, it says, on the patio. Following in the footsteps, as we've already heard this week, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos is going to be hanging out next week, both giving $1 million to the inaugural fund. What does Tim Cook bring to the table at Mar-a-Lago?
Yeah, I think Cook's visit will be followed by another $1 million. Of course, Tim Cook probably had the earliest relationship with Donald Trump when Donald Trump first came in 2016, when we think back to, some of these tech executives. But we are seeing, tech executives go hat in hand to Mar-a-Lago and pay their respects to Donald Trump. And of course, it makes sense from the perspective of their businesses, their shareholders, the futures of their business. I think one of the broader questions that we need to ask about this is it really the case that a stronger executive branch is going to be better for their businesses in the long term? And that's not something they're thinking about. They're thinking short term Donald Trump. But the reality is, if you look historically, stronger executives don't always make for better business environments. And that's something that the business community will have to deal with in the 4 years after Donald Trump leaves office, if the executive office is really, really aggrandized the way he plans to.
Well, I guess either way, the inauguration will be better for them. Coming up, Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano stay with us with more to talk about. Take a look again at that Army-Navy game where the biggest play might be happening off the field. Will they craft the congressional agenda tomorrow at the ball game? It's next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
We got to take care of the border as a top priority, and we will. We've got to get the economy going again, and we will. Part of that is ensuring that we don't have the largest tax increase in U.S. history on the American people at the end of this coming year when those Trump tax cuts expire. So we can walk and chew gum at the same time. The sequence and the use of reconciliation is really important. There are thoughtful discussions going on right now. They will be all day. President-elect Trump and I will be talking about this in depth this weekend before the Army-Navy game.
Speaker Mike Johnson earlier this week saying, he's going to talk reconciliation with Donald Trump at the football game tomorrow. Back with us, our closers, Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano. We've made it to the threshold of the weekend. Rick, why a football game? You can't get a little office space to talk about the congressional agenda? Are we really to believe that this will be solved this weekend?
By the way, did I remind you enough that I'm going to the Army-Navy game with Donald Trump? There's so many people, that's the first thing out of their mouth.
Rick has our radio audience doesn't see this, but we have a Navy tag going on right now.
We have a very Navy tie going on, and I resisted wearing my Navy hat. Look, I mean, this is a very important thing that is going to be discussed, the legislative agenda for next year. And, what is it that we're going to see from Congress? Are they going to package a giant omnibus reconciliation bill with everything in it, energy and taxes and border, billions and billions of dollars, maybe close to $1 trillion in spending? Or are they going to split it up like the Senate wants to do and take it in chunks, at least two big pieces anyway? And I think Donald Trump, he's the man who likes things big. I would be shocked that we don't wind up with a massive reconciliation bill with everything in it.
There you have it.
Okay.
Right from the football game.
Well, he might like big pieces of legislation, Jeannie. I'm not sure he likes rather big unidentified flying objects or drones that are up in the area where you are right now. He took to True Social just a few minutes ago about the mystery drone sightings, he says, all over the country. Can this really be happening without our government's knowledge? I don't think so. Let the public know. And now, otherwise shoot them down. Signed DJT. Jeannie, you're up there. What's going on?
I wish I could tell you. It is very strange. And the last I heard, one dropped in a backyard somewhere last night. To Donald Trump's point, the answers from the government have not been that fulfilling. So we do need to know what is happening. Who is it? Mulder and Scully? Who were they again? I can't think of the names. We need them on this right now because we're a little concerned up here. And by the way, you guys down there, last year they were down in your area, right? Virginia. So something's going on.
So what if it's some guy's brother-in-law, with the drone up there? He's drinking a beer in the garage. Now the president-elect is posting about this. Are we sure we want to shoot these down?
Well, could you imagine being outside tonight and hearing gunshots going on? And by the way, some of these drones are probably being used by municipalities to, watch for illegal activity and things like that. So I would make my pitch. Please do not get your guns out tonight. It's not open season on drones. The government will protect you from the drone mystery.
Stay home and watch the game.
And incredibly, that is the note we will end this show and this week on.
Strange hour of broadcast.
It's Friday.
It's a great panel.
And we always have fun on Fridays with our closers, Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano. Thank you both so much for joining us. And that does wrap up another week in Washington. Next week, though, is going to be a big one because next week is go time on funding. We got a deadline a week from tonight.
Kaylee Lyons will take you through it all. I will not see you until after Christmas. So Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah. Yeah. I'll miss you. Do something fun. Be responsible. Check out the Washington Edition newsletter, and we'll see you back here on Bloomberg TV and radio.